Good morning, Moray Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are on Daf Lamed Bet, Amud Bet. The learning of Amud Yomi for Chodesh Heshvan has been sponsored by Lui Nishmat Yosef ben Simcha, Simcha bat Rachel, Aliza Talia Sarabat Chanoch Faivo by Mishpachat Hami. Should be a protections put for the entire family. Also has been co-sponsored by Shahab and Shen Rabbi for the health, happiness, peace, and prosperity of their entire family, and should have nahat from all of their children. Amen. Amen. Today also is the yortzeit of the Rosh Yeshiva of Los Angeles. You could call him Rabbi Simcha Wasserman, who really, when nothing was going on over here, he was the pioneer, the first one that really came to be Meyasa Torah in this town. And Bet Cheshvan is a tremendous thing to realize that much of what we stand on has been pioneered, and the foundation has been really poured by the Mesirut Nefesh of people who came earlier on to build Torah in the desert that was Los Angeles back then. So it should be for Aliyat Neshama of Rabbi Simcha Wasserman Alav Shalom as well. Now we are almost in the middle of the daf. About 3 lines from the wide lines. Tar Rabbanan starts the line. 4 things need to be constantly strengthened. What are those 4 things? So of course we're coming off one of them, of a person strengthening themselves in tefillah, even though that they davened and they don't see hatzlacha in their tefillah. Kavel Hashem, hazak v'yames libecha v'kavel Hashem. You hope to Hashem, which is the expression of tefillah, is hope. That you're looking forward to a life that is better. That's the concept of tefillah. And if it didn't happen, chazak v'yames libecha, you strengthen yourself again. V'kavel Hashem, you daven again. So that's what we're coming off of. And that brings us to this Gemara, that there are 4 items that the person has to be strengthening himself in them constantly. And Rashi says so beautifully that this chizuk needs to be with 2 elements. Srichin chizuk, writes Rashi, sheyitchazek adam bahen tamid b'chol kocho. It has to be constant, it has to be consistent, it has to be with all of your might. The only way that these 4 could work is if you are constantly on top of them and not just mediocre, but really with all of your power, with all of your might. Now, what are they? Torah, good deeds, tefillah, and derech eretz, which is a reference to your job, basically, to your livelihood, whatever it is that you do for your life, right? Whatever it is that defines your physical life outside the Torah and mitzvot. So says the Gemara, Torah ma'asim tovim minayin. How do we know Torah and ma'asim tovim? Because the pasuk says, "Rak chazak ve'emas me'ot lishmor v'la'asot." Shlomo speaks to Yeshua. Be very strong, chazak ve'emas. That nature of 2 words, which is chazak ve'emas, is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to Yeshua, and the rest of the pasuk is lishmor ve'la'asot. To do and to keep all of the mitzvot and the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Moshe, my servant gave you. Al tasur mimenu yamin, small, do not deviate from it left and right. The Maharsha says, how do you see from that Torah u'masim tovim? Says the Maharsha, because there are 2 languages and 2 concepts discussed in this pasuk. Rak chazak ve'emas. Chazak is, says the Maharsha, for the Torah, and ematz is physical power to doing of the mitzvot. So that's Torah u'masim tovim. That's what the Maharsha writes. Marel Diskin says chazak means to go up. Ematz means not to come down. to solidify yourself where you are. And it says the Maharil Liskin, because by Masim Tovim, you could hit a pinnacle. You could hit the top that you can't do more Masim Tovim. So therefore, the avodah is get to the top and stay up there. Getting to the top as a diagram like this, that's easy. To hit the top is easy. To stay up there in Masim Tovim, to do one great deed one time is very easy, right? Ordinary people sometimes do great things, but great people do ordinary things.
Extraordinary.
No, ordinary things, always. To do the consistent ordinary things that you do, the Masim Tovim is all about consistency. Rambam writes, it's better to give 100 times $1,000 than to give one time $100,000, because you become a Baal Tzedakah, right? You become a Baal Tzedakah. You can also give $100,000 once and also give, that's even better. But that's what makes a person change, is the consistency. That's chaz ematz. That's staying up there, not coming down. But by Torah, there's no end. There's no ceiling. So that's chazak, constantly becoming bigger and bigger. That's what the Maharil discusses. But that doesn't end there. The pashtut, to me, it seems, the pashtut of the pasuk is not just the diuk, and the Marsha alludes to this, not just because of the wording chazak ve'emas, but because it says lishmor la'asot. Lishmor la'asot. And we find this elsewhere in the Gemara also, that lishmor is for the mitzvot, la'asot is the doing. So lishmor is the Torah, and la'asot, of course, is the doing of ma'asim tovim. So there are two elements in that pasuk that HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yeshua, and you find that he says me'od. One of the only times that he says me'od. You have to be super strong. Chazak ve'emas me'od. You have to be tremendously chazak ve'emas, which means what Rashi said, that you have to constantly, consistently, with all of your might, be on top of them. So that's Torah and Maasim Tovim. Chazak beTorah ve'ematz b'Maasim Tovim. Says the Gemara. Tefillah minayin. How do we know tefillah? We already discussed that in the previous Gemara. Kavel Hashem chazak ve'ematz libecha ve'kavel Hashem. You daven, nothing happens. You strengthen yourself. You daven again. Derech eretz minayin. How do you know that with your job you have to be also like that? You have to stay on top of your job. You can't say, well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take care of me. I'm just going to sit down and do nothing. You have to do it responsibly, says the Gemara, because the pasuk says, "Chazak v'nitchazek ba'ad amenu." This is a pasuk describing when the Jewish army was going to war. Back then, Yoav ben Tzruya and his brother Avishai ben Tzruya were the heads of the army of David HaMelech. And Yoav tells his brother Avishai, "Chazak v'nitchazek ba'ad amenu." We should be strengthened to go and to fight the war and to win the war. Now, their job was fighting the war. The other heads of the army. And the Gemara says, this is what you need for every job that a person does. Now, by the way, who is the most mentioned woman in Tanakh? Who knows this? No? Everyone says Sarah, Hannah, Devorah. No one gets it right. And part of why no one gets it right is because everyone knows this name, but no one knows that that's a woman. Everybody thinks that name is a reference to a man. But everyone knows Yoav ben Tzruya, we just mentioned, right? Yoav ben Tzruya is the mother of Yoav. Avishai ben Tzruya, Asael ben Tzruya, all of them, they're the sons of this woman called Tzruya, which is the most mentioned woman in Tanakh. So says the Gemara, once we mentioned the Tfilah Moshe Rabbeinu after Chet HaEgel, and he's pleading on behalf of the Jews not to leave them and not to destroy them, we bring also another very similar concept of after the destruction, Jews basically complaining that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has left them and has forgotten and forsaken them. Vatomer Tzion, Zion, Sion. Am Yisrael says, Azavani Hashem, Hashem has left me. Hashem Shechechani, Hashem has forgotten me. The Gemara says, wait a second. Hainu Azuba, Hainu Shchucha. What's the difference between a forsaken and forgotten? Says the Gemara, Amar Rish Lakish, Amra Knesset Yisrael Ifna HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Jews are saying an argument in front of Hashem. Ribono shel olam, Adam nosei isha al ishto rishona. A person marries a second wife, right? This is pre Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom, or for the Sfaradim who marry two wives. They used to marry two wives, right? A person marries a wife on top of his first wife, but really, I think this Gemara is now referring to two wives. It's referring to first wife got divorced, got no longer living, marries a second wife. Zocher ma'aseh rishona. He still remembers the first wife. But you, ata azaftani, you left us. And shchachtani. Not only you've left us, but you've forgotten us, as if you don't even remember us anymore. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the all-time greatest answer. Hashem says, what do you mean? Amala HaKadosh Baruch Hu biti, my daughter. Yudbet mazalot barati. I have created 12 constellations in Berakia, in the heavens. Val kol mazalu mazal. On each one of these 12, barati lo shloshim hayil. I created 30 armies. Val kol hayil v'chayil barati lo shloshim ligyon. Is a greater language of a constellation. On each one of those chayils, I created 30 ligyon. Ve'al kol ligyon ve'ligyon barati lo shloshim ra'aton. On each one of those is 30 other ones, 30 groups. And on each one of Ra'atons, barati lo shloshim karton. And on each one of those, barati lo shloshim gistra, 30 gistras. And al kol gistra ve'gistra, on each one of the gistras, taliti bo 365 alfei ribo. 365,000 times 10,000. You with me? It's a big, this is quadrillion of stars. Really, this, shockingly, this is again written 2,000 years ago. And nowadays, every time they're finding still, with, especially when the Hubble telescope went up there, they're finding new galaxies, and you have thousands of you have actually 2 trillions of galaxies times billions of stars, and the number actually shockingly matches the number that the Gemara gives, which is like the recent things that Rabbi Zamir Cohen put out several Sfarim, and there are others as well. He gathers these things in his books, but there are many amazing articles about this. How the Gemara 2,000 years ago had the exact number of stars that we know nowadays, which is tremendous. Like you look at the Gemara says, we're going to get to it, that Shmuel says Kima, right, which is the stars that we see with naked eye. You could see only 7. If you have a very sharp eye in a clear day, you see 8. And the Gemara says, what's Kima? It says Keme Akochavi. Almost 100, around 100 stars. Back then, you said that to somebody, they laughed at your face. So you only see, with a good telescope, you can see 17, 18 of them. But when they had the Hubble telescope, then they saw that it is actually 100. I don't remember exactly the number, but it's Keme'a Kochavi. So this is tremendous things that kind of like heartwarming to know that we don't. The knowledge of Torah does not work, beginning to end. It works end to the beginning. When you know things from the actual source of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is a tremendous, tremendous thing. So basically, the Gemara says this is 12 times 30 times 30 times 30 times 30 times 30 times 365. What? No, it's 1,000 times 10,000, which is how much? 1,000.
10 million.
That's the whole number together, but
It's 10 million.
all of them together. This is 1,000 times 10,000, which means it has seven zeros. So it's 10 million, right? 10 million times 365. No, 10 million times 365, which is the days of the Shnat HaChama, right? So what do you have to do that? So you basically do another 3 zeros, which is now you have 10 zeros. But then you have 30 times 30 times 30 times 30 times 30 times 12 on top of that. So that's who would come up with this number if it's not the Kabbalah, right? This also, by the way, it's not time for proving Torah, but it's amazing. The Gemara says that the Molat of the Levana, we have a Kabbalah from, Adam Arishon, basically, a Kabbalah from Moshe Rabbeinu, and before that the Molat of Levana is, and the Gemara says it to the 1/10,000th of a second. And NASA, a number of years ago, when they did their cheshbon, they were I think 2/10,000th of a second away from it. And then the Germans did it a little bit more exact, and they came even closer. They're just 1/10,000th of a second away. It's a tremendous thing. And David Hever Shlita from Star K showed me an article. I should have got a copy from it of some Goyish thing in NASA that saw this. Someone showed him the Gemara and was so blown away. He wrote an entire article about this thing, that there's no way that any human being could have written this 2,000 years ago. If it's not divinely inspired, there's no way. So says the Gemara.
Sorry, the telescope, you're saying a human can see 100 stars at once? Is that what you're saying? And the telescope sees more? Maybe I missed it.
No. There's a group of kochavim, right? The Kima, the Gemara calls it. We're going to get to it. And we only see, this is the dipper, right?
Oh, you're talking about a specific area of the sky.
Yeah, you see it every night. You see it. It's like it's like a ladle.
Right.
Now you see it, 7 of them, or if you have a very good eye, you see 8. With the regular telescope, you could see, I think, 17, 18 of them. The Gemara says it's 100, almost more than 100. And for all these years, people must have laughed at the face of everyone that read the Gemara, but nevertheless, we have always said what we believed with a straight face. Says the Gemara, and that is because of the 365 days in the solar calendar. All of this, all of the universe, all the galaxies, everything that I have created only for you. And you say I have forsaken you. You say I have forgotten you. How can I forget you? The whole creation has been made, like we just had Berachot Bishvil Yisrael Shenikro Rashit. I created the whole world because of Israel, because of a nation that would accept the Torah, and that's you. So says the Gemara, Hatishkach Isha Ulah, which literally translated would be, would a mother forget her baby? Merahem ben bitna, a compassionate mother, would she forget ever her child that she gave birth to? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, kilu meshkach olot. Now the Gemara is darshaning ulah, not her baby, but olot from the language olah. Would I ever forget olot elim upitre rehamim? Merahem ben bitna is pitre rehem. Would I ever forget the korbanot that you brought? Shikrafta lefanai bamidbar. Amar lefanav. So the Jews go back. This is a Jewish mind. They say, "Oh, you say you never forget anything? So maybe maybe because you don't forget anything, that's exactly why you left us, because you don't forget that we made a golden calf." Right? Says the Gemara, "Shema lo tishkach li ma'aseh ha'egel." And Hashem right away answers, the rest of the pasuk is, Gam ele tishakachna va'anochi lo eshkachech. Let's actually read the pasuk together. The simple meaning of the pasuk is very profound also. It says, Hatishkach isha ulah, would a mother forget her child, her baby, merahem ben bitna, a compassionate mother, would she ever forget ben bitna, the son that came out of her stomach, that she carried for 9 months, she gave birth to, she sustained, she nourished, she nursed. They will never forget. Hashem says, and even if they would forget, I still would not. My love to you is thousands of times more than a mother's love to the child. That's the literal translation of the passage, which is profound by itself. But the Gemara is going to darshin, and the Gemara says the Jews argued back. Maybe you won't forget our sins of Chet HaEgel. Once Hashem said no. Gam ele tishakachna. The Maaseh HaEgel, where people said ele Elohecha Yisrael. The words ele. Their sin started with ele Elohe. This is your God. That tishakachna, I will forget. Gam ele tishakachna. That sin that you did, I do forget. Then the Gemara says, wait a second. Amra nefanav, the Jewish community says in front of Hashem, so it says, make your mind. So you do forget. So maybe now you're going to forget that we accepted the Torah. Also, that we accepted your yoke of your kingdom. Shema tishkach li ma'aseh Sinai. Maybe you'll forget what happened at Har Sinai. Amar la, Hashem gives the final answer. It says, Ve'anochi lo eshkachech. The beginning of Maaseh Sinai was Anochi Hashem Elokecha. The first words starting the Aseret HaDivrot was Anochi. Hashem says, Anochi, I will never forget, Hashem says. The fact that you accepted the Torah, starting with Anochi, that I never forget. Ele Elohecha Yisrael, I do forget. The Maaseh, your sins, I forget. Your good things, I don't forget. And that's the extent of love that I have for you. So therefore, don't you dare saying that I forget and forsaken. And this is the same thing that Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Yoshaya. Then what is it that it says? That is a reference to Maaseh HaEgel because they said Ele Elokecha Yisrael v'anochi lo eshkachech. That part of the pasuk Zeh Maaseh Sinai. It's a reference to Maaseh Sinai because it says Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Now we read the Mishnah. We spoke about this before, that the pious individuals, they actually would wait 1 full hour. We mentioned that in Shas many times when you say Sha'achad, just means a few moments, a few minutes. But if you remember, we mentioned that in Daf Lamed Bet, Amud Bet, you're gonna see that this is literal 60-minute hours. That they literally would sit before the tefillah to try to contemplate, to take themselves out of the physicalities of life, as a physical world, to be attached to the Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu when they daven, and they would also sit a whole hour afterwards to internalize what the high, lofty madrigot that they reached, and to incorporate that in their life that they're going to be living now. Or a simple understanding, that's too lofty. Simple understanding is you don't want to seem like you're running out of the shul, right? There's actually halakha. When you come to shul, you take fast steps, you run to show yourself excited. When you go out of the shul, it's asur to run out of the shul. You want to walk slowly out of the shul, even if you're in a rush. It's the first few steps that you take like calmly, and then you could go a little fast because you don't want to show that this was should have checked the list. I'm out of here, right? Meiri writes, by the way, that's why we have Anan Shabeach. The reason that we have institution of Anan Shabeach is to give praise at the end of Tefillah. You don't run out. Unfortunately, nowadays people are running out as they're saying Anan Shabeach, so it defeats the whole purpose. You want to stand like a sergeant, like a soldier, close your eyes and say Anan Shabeach with kavanah, because that's the whole Meiri writes. That's the whole purpose because of this. So nevertheless, that's for regular people. But the Shulchan Aruch paskins this halacha as though this Chasidim Arishonim is not just the original pious individuals, but it is for all of us as well, which we mentioned. Like Rav others say, we don't have to do a whole hour, but you have to do something. You want to do 2 minutes, you want to do 5 minutes. You have to do something. Make it in the beginning, something at the end. You don't come running into Shemona Esrei. You don't go running out of Shemona Esrei. You need preparations before, you need contemplation afterwards. So it says, the Gemara, now we're going to actually study this. How do we know? Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, Ashrei yoshevei betecha. Fortunate are the ones who sit in your house, and then Od Yahalidu Chasela. So first they sit, then they praise you. So prior to tefillah, they sit, Ashrei yoshevei betecha. They wait in the shul, they sit in the shul a little bit before they start their praise. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Shlomo said, it's not only before, but you have to do sha'achat, 1 hour or something, after tefillah. As the pasuk says, Ach tzadikim yodu lishmecha, tzadikim will praise your name, which means a reference to tefillah. And then afterwards it says, Yeshvu yesharim et panecha, they will sit in front of you afterwards. So it's not that they sit, they daven, and then they sit. The first half of it we learn from Asher Shebetecha Od Yelu Chasela. The second half of it we learn from Ach Tzadikim Yodu Shmecha Yeshua Yesharim Et Panecha. Great. Tani Nami Hachi. We learned it also in the Braita. Hamitpalel Tzarich Sheyish Sha'ah Achat Kodem Tfilato. We learned in the Braita that the person that davens, he should sit 1 hour before Tfilah. The Sha'ah Achat Achat Tfilato, and 1 hour after Tfilah. Kodem Tfilato Minayin. Before Tfilah, what's the source? Shenemar Asher Shebetecha. Fortunate are those who sit in your house. And then afterwards it says, Od Yahalidu Chasela. After tefillah, how do we know? As the pasuk says, Ach tzadikim yodu lishmecha, yeshavu yesharim et panecha. That they praise you and then they sit. So it says the Gemara, now we go back to that Mishnah. We learned Chasidim Harishonim, the original pious individuals, they would wait 1 hour before tefillah, with palerin sha'achat, and they would daven 1 hour. And then they would wait another hour. Then the Gemara says, wait a second. They didn't have 48 hours. We all want to have 48 hours. But 24 hours, which, how many hours of it you're awake and you're not eating and you're not doing basic needs? 9 hours they're doing for tefillah. Torah Taleach Mishtameret. How do they learn Torah? They also have to retain their Torah. You have to review, to remember. You can't just come to Amud Yomi and hope that you're going to remember everything. You have to review it, right? Some individuals that they don't want me to say their names, we're sitting here at 5:20 this morning, reviewing their learning, right? Lazara, that fish, yeah, exactly. So I took a picture of them. At some point I'm going to send it. I don't have their permission, but we'll see. Right? So that's the thing is after Hazara. So how did they do Hazara? 9 hours of tefillah. How did they do Hazara? And it's not just that. Melachta lechina, they have to work. How do they put bread on their table? When do they work? When do they do Hazara on their limud? Gemara says that this is amazing, right? Because they're Hasidim, Toratam mishtameret u'melachtan mitbarechet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a special siyata dishmaya both in their limud that they learn and they don't forget, and in their job, in their business, that they just bracha comes in their thing. When you dedicate yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu lishma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu dedicates himself back to you to make sure that you have what you need. And that's tremendous, right? You learn and you don't forget. The Gemara says in Masechet Megillah, we had this the Vav, that to remember you need siyata dishmaya. And when does HaKadosh Baruch Hu give siyata dishmaya? When he says you dedicated to him, you're waiting 9 hours because you want to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You go do one business deal, you make enough for a whole month, right? And even those who are on, someone was just telling me, someone has W2, and they spend these things on Yom Kippur, and Rosh Hashanah over here, And after the Hag, they got a number of checks in their mail, which they didn't even know it was from something that they signed up from years and years ago. And it just sent a check, and they added up the checks was exactly the amount that they give to. Unbelievable. Like, I have to get his permission. He's actually a Amud Yomi guy. But even if you have the Akash Baruch Hu, to send bracha like that, it is something that Akash Baruch Hu could do. So it says the Gemara. Afilu hamelech shoel b'Shlomo lo yeshivenu. We said that even the king comes and asks how you doing and says Shalom Aleichem, you don't answer when you daven. Amar Rabbi Yosef lo shanu el Malchei Yisrael. Rabbi Yosef says, wait a second. This is only talking about Malchei Yisrael because he understands tefillah. He also sometimes comes to Amud Yomi. He knows the halacha. But a melech akum, a goy that doesn't know and doesn't necessarily care about this, for goyish king, you stop because sakarat nefashot can kill you. The master says, wait a second, you stop. They asked the question, a strong question, the Bet Midrash Meisvei, Betive. If you're davening and you see an anas, a strong, mighty man coming towards you, and if you don't answer him, he may just smash your skull. Or you see karon bakenegdo, you see a carriage is coming and he may hit you. Car is coming, basically. Lo yeh mafsik, you cannot stop. What do? Ela mekatzer ve'oleh. You shorten your tefillah and you finish it up quickly. So says the Gemara, you just told me that you have to stop. This Braita tells me you don't have to stop. You shouldn't stop. You should just make it short. So it's a stira, it's a contradiction. And I says, no, it's not a contradiction. Look, Kasha, depends where you're holding in the tefillah. Sometimes it's possible to finish up quickly. You're towards the end of the tefillah anyways. And you see from far the anas is coming, so you get 1 minute to finish up quickly. So you finish it up. Don't stop, but finish up. But sometimes you see him when he is 2 steps away from you, and he's almost starting saying Shalom Aleichem, or you're in the beginning of tefillah, you can't finish up. So in that case, you stop. Says the Gemara, one of them is in a scenario that you could quickly finish up, and the other one is where you can't. So says the Gemara, there was a Chassid Echad, which usually is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai or Rabbi Yehuda Bar Baba, one of those two, whenever the Gemara says Chassid Echad. He was davening on the way. Uba Sarehad, one of the high officials, Goyish high officials, came, when Natan lo shalom, he said, oh, Rabbi, shalom aleichem. He didn't answer anything. Imtin lo ad shesiyem. This official stayed there. He was very angry. He waited until he finished his tefillah. He said, Oseh shalom bimromav. La'achar shesiyem tefilato. Afterwards, amar lo reka. He told him, the fool that you are. V'halo katuv betoratchem. I have read the Bible. It says, Rak yishaber lecha ushmor nafshecha. Now, it says, be very careful and keep your soul. There, it's talking about pentishkach et advarim asher ra'u einecha, right? It's talking about not forgetting Torah. Yishamer lecha ushmor nafshecha. You should be very careful not to forget what you saw on Har Sinai, not to forget the Torah. But we darshan from those, you have to watch your health. You have to watch your life. He says you have to be very careful with your souls. When I gave you shalom, why didn't you answer me, you fool? You see my saif, you see my sword here? If I would chop off your head because you made me angry, who would have said anything? Nobody could say anything to me. I'm a high official. I could have killed you. I would have, should have, could have. You should have answered me. Why didn't you? Amaleh, he said to him, Hamtenli, wait until I appease you. Give me a moment to explain. Amaleh, ilu hayita omed, says you are a high official. If you were standing in front of a king, Now, you're a high official, but you're not the king. If you were standing in front of your superior or the king himself, and as you're speaking to the king, your friend comes and says, hey, how you doing? He says shalom to you. Would you answer him? He said, of course not. Love. And if you would answer him, what would be your verdict? What would be your judgment? They would have cut off my head if I would do that. So he says, listen to what you're saying yourself. Isn't it the kal vachomer? You telling me that even in front of just a flesh and blood king, that today he's here, tomorrow is going to be in the grave, and still you, because of his kavod, it would not be proper to answer your friend. I was standing in front of the King of all kings. He's eternal. Forever and ever. That's a kal vachomer that I should not answer you. Miyat nitfayes. This guy was miyat nitfayes. He accepted that. It's a good answer. You Jews always know what to say. Right? This chassid went home in one piece. Now, the question is, how in the world was it mutar for him to do this? Endangered his life, thinking that he's going to explain. Like, the rule sometimes is you first shoot and then you ask questions, right? So how did he do it? And the Mefarshim say, because the Taz, for instance, says this. The Taz brings this in Siman Samech Vav in Orach Chaim, and he says the derech was that this was not a king. This was a high official. High officials were not allowed to kill before questioning, before at least a personal trial, right? So he relied on the fact that he's going to wait. He's going to ask me. He's going to be angry. I'm going to explain. The Magen Avraham says a very similar thing. The Magen Avraham in Siman Kuf Dalit, he asks the same question. And he says that he was so batuach, this chassid was completely sure of himself that this guy is going to accept the answer, because if he had any safek, it would not be mutar for him to not answer. He must have answered, right? And some say that he didn't actually see this guy coming. He didn't realize that this guy was asking shalom. He was so in olamot ha'elyonim that he didn't even hear this person talk to him until the end. But if he would have heard, if he would have realized, he must have, halachically, he must have stopped, because you're endangering your life. And Bezat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.